Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, coming back to you with another video. And this video, I'm with Ranier Maningding from The Love Life of an Asian Guy, and we're going to be talking about representing ourselves and our people. So I would like to give a little time to Ranier to introduce himself.
Hey everybody, so my name is Ranier Maningding, and I am the writer and creator of The Love Life of an Asian Guy. I started off as a WordPress writer, and I eventually ventured off into Facebook. And I've been growing this platform for, seems like it's about 10 years. And we have a really large presence on Facebook, Instagram, Facebook groups, and we're primarily a community for people of color to discuss different social issues. And on our Facebook groups, we have different subsections for parenting, for food. So if you have an interest in any of those topics, that's definitely the place to go.
Cool. So we're going to be talking about representation of Asians in film and animation and giving a voice to our communities. So under the representation of Asians in film and animation, what do you think about the history of representation for Asian characters? So that's anime in general, and then if we bring it to more recent stuff, we got Crazy Rich Asians, Always Be My Maybe, Big Hero 6, Abominable, Bow, and Float.
Yeah, so, the representation of Asian Americans is a fascinating subject because for a lot of people, they don't know that Asian Americans have been in media for such a long time. Some of the first extras in Hollywood were actually Filipino migrants who were predominantly working class individuals. But when Hollywood started to boom in the 20s and the 30s, they wanted cheap labor. And so Filipinos would go in and, because we can be brown and sort of ambiguous, we would play either Asian characters or Hispanic characters or, quote, Indians, Native Americans. Yeah. And so our entry into entertainment has, we've been in here for a very long time, but unfortunately the first 70 years really were all just incredibly racist forms of misrepresentation. Some of the first images depicting Asian Americans were as very unintelligent and foreign and goofy, and you can see characters in animation like in Mr. Magoo. I can't remember what the Asian character was like, but he was just the most racist stereotypical character with the rice hat and just the super slanted eyes. He was like Mr. Magoo's butler or whatever. So fast forwarding it to Crazy Rich Asians, there's such a huge monumental shift in how we are portraying Asian Americans. I think the first real big step is allowing Asian Americans to tell their own stories. But I think that we are just at the beginning of Asian American representation in Hollywood. I think sort of the first step of a lot of communities that want to be represented is they want to show very bright and successful images and, look how awesome we are, look how beautiful we are, look how incredible our stories are. But I'm really curious to see the development of this representation as it goes on to, let's go talk to Asian Americans who have more niche interests, or Asian Americans who aren't as glamorous and ritzy as Crazy Rich Asians. So I think over time we're going to see a little bit more nuance injected in Asian American representation, and I'm really excited for that. I think the 2020s will be an opportunity to hear more from South Asians and Southeast Asians. So I think a lot of the media that we have now for Asian Americans tends to be very feel good and very positive and stuff like that, but I want to see more stories of our actual lived in experiences.
Yeah, with the movie Always Be My Maybe, something that I liked about that was 2 years ago I decided to start watching Lifetime Christmas movies, and then I quit very quickly when I realized that they're all the same story. And then and then I watched Always Be My Maybe, which was like the same storyline as Christmas movies, where the guy, all that's, everybody knows. And so, but I liked it because they did it well. and I liked it because it was a story where the people were Asian, and you had the little things that they put in that will probably be feel good for people from San Francisco or people who know the different Asian cultures that were represented in a movie. It was the same plot line, but the way they did it, I liked. It's like you can do the same story over and over again, but just do it differently. And so I liked that. There was those. I feel like even though I wasn't, because I think Chinese and Korean was represented in the movie, but even though I wasn't like Asian, those particular Asians, I feel like I could still tell there was things in the movie where, oh, if you're from San Francisco, that was for you, or if you're Korean or Chinese, that was for you. And so that's something I liked about how they approached the movie. Did you get to see it?
Yeah, I saw it. I actually really liked it. I mean, granted, I'm not the biggest rom-com fan, and I sort of saw it as like it was really cute, and I liked that we were going in this direction where the two characters were allowed to just be kind of regular people. It's not like, oh, here's this doctor and the president of this. It's like, like, because sometimes Asian movies can be like that where all the characters are just so elite. And so It was nice to see something a little bit more relatable, and especially coming from the Bay Area. I did catch on a lot of those little references, so I really liked it. And I've always believed that we have just an infinite number of movies and media about white people's stories, and it's like you really could do the same story. Like you could do a coming of age story, you can do a story of going to war or retiring or whatever, and replace that with another different group, and you will have a different unique story. It's like if you do it from the vantage point of Asian people who moved to San Francisco, like it'll be a completely different narrative than if you were trying to tell the story about Asian Americans who were coming in from New York or something like that. So I think it's fascinating that we're finally getting into these smaller, more relatable stories.
Yeah. And so did you get like a Disney Plus trial or anything? Did you get to see Float? Did you get to see Float?
No, I didn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel like unless I'm just, I don't feel like there was a cultural thing I missed, but it just seems like the characters could have been anybody.
I heard that. Yeah.
So I was just like, oh, okay, I guess.
and that's the thing, is that like representation is this weird thing where we're always championing for it, and we're always wanting to have more representation, and then you get something and then you're like, well, I wanted representation but not that kind. And I think you touch on a really good point where a lot of media nowadays, a lot of executives are trying to do that whole, oh, well, here's a character who was white, the whole origin is white and blah, 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 but we're just going to tweak this one thing and make this character Latino or Asian.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do get this feeling of like, okay, cool, I get to see the representation, but like, does the story feel true and authentic to that group of people? And I mean, I guess in that case, I guess it doesn't.
Yeah, but I think the person who created it, who I think was Filipino, had it was like a personal story, but it was like, it still could have been anybody. I was just like, okay, yeah. Throw some stuff in. I mean, even if he threw some stuff in, I probably would have missed it. But I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's just like it's a nice thing. It's nice that we have that, and it's great that it's an accessible form of representation that people can sort of identify with and be like, oh, hey, they're like me too. But
yeah,
again, I think we could obviously do better.
Yeah. So, a question that I would like to ask is, what are some key Filipino traits that a character or story could have that would let you know that a Filipino had a hand in it? Like, because with me, for Into the Spider-Verse, and then like the short called Substance that Jamal Bradley, it was like very obvious that Black animators did it just from the way they walk or act or something like that. So from your vantage point, if you had a movie or TV show that had Filipino characters, what is something that will be thrown in where you'll be like, yeah, Filipino did that?
It's tough because I think also in order to answer that question, I have to sort of implore about what it means to be Filipino American, and that's one of the things that I've wrestled with for such a long time, just trying to figure out like what does it mean to be Filipino American, because within Filipino communities you have colorism and you have um, classism born of colonization, and so there are so many different aspects. So you know like you could tell a story about Filipinos, and it could be from the vantage point of us being very artistic, and a lot of Filipinos who take up arts and music and dance. But then there's also aspects of Filipino culture where a lot of us, because of our history with colonization, there are a lot of us who are very political, and a lot of us who are, um, you know, who are always trying to fight for people who are underrepresented. And so there are a lot of aspects to being Filipino that I think um, I could vibe with in terms of how we are
Mhm.
represented. But I was thinking about like if there was a significant thing that I could say that, oh, that is Filipino.
Mhm.
Um and I just couldn't think of anything. I think it was more just um about maybe the look. I think oftentimes um people, when they think of Asians, they think that Asians all look like East Asians. They don't realize that there are Filipinos and there are Southeast Asians who are brown, and people who have different types of colored skin and
Mhm.
hair texture, and their nose looks different or their face looks different. And so I think that is one of the things for me, because being Filipino, oftentimes we are ridiculed by East Asians for being like the ugly Asians or the jungle Asians. And so I think being able to represent that side in a positive light,
Mhm.
um, I would attribute that as being sort of a form of positive Filipino representation. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think it really is complicated, because Filipinos are still trying to figure out who they are themselves.
Yeah.
I feel like it. I mean, obviously, Black Americans have like a culture, but we're still like simultaneously trying to figure out ourselves too.
Mhm.
um, but while I have you, why can all Filipinos sing?
So here's the thing that I always wondered about, because so growing up, I grew up in a Catholic household, and I remember going to church as early as I can remember being alive. And my sister and her now husband, they were always in choir, and going to Filipino friends and relatives. Like, someone was always playing karaoke, and I was trying to figure out like why are Filipinos always so like really good at singing? Why do they love singing? Um, and I think a lot of it really does stem from the fact that, one, we were colonized by Spain, and so a lot of us became Catholic, and through
Mhm.
Catholicism, a lot of us got into church music and gospel, and so a lot of Filipinos grew up listening to gospel singers or 80s ballads, and just
Mhm.
so much of our music culture is influenced um, by a lot of Black American artists.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of Filipinos just naturally took to that style as a way to communicate and express themselves. And it's interesting because I feel like I can see this in a lot of other cultures that went through a period of colonization
Mhm.
where they adopted Catholic beliefs. So whether you're talking about like Mexicans or whether you're talking about South Koreans, like the ones who ended up singing in the church evidently just got the practice and ended up being really good singers. So it's a weird way of bonding over the
Yeah.
fact that we have shared colonial history, but also the fact that we can sing good. So woo!
Yeah. So that was a random question. That was not originally on the list, but I was like, since you're
No
here,
problem.
um, what do you hope for the future of representation of Asian characters?
I th- I hope that the future of Asian characters, um, like I was sort of mentioning before, is one that's more nuanced, and one that allows Asian Americans to feel that it's okay to not be a doctor or to not be a scientist, or it's okay to be a normal person. And it's sort of a weird thing to say, but so many Asian Americans are raised to believe that they're only valid unless the career they have pays enough, and that anything below that, or anything that has to do with the arts, or anything that has to do with a career that doesn't make a boatload of money, is somehow seen as less honorable. And so I would love to be able to see more media and representation of like Asian American dancers and Asian American poets and writers and filmmakers. It's one that doesn't try to, like I was saying before, it doesn't try to make Asian Americans seem like this perfect community where we have all these, like, we're so fabulous and we're so awesome and you want to hang out with us and you want to be with us. Interestingly enough, probably my favorite movie for Asian American representation is the Harold and Kumar series. Because I remember being in high school, and I think it came out in high school, when I was in high school, and I just remember feeling so seen by having like just two sort of these slacker Asian guys, and like it just felt relatable in the sense that like they weren't trying to be martial artists, they weren't trying to be like these cool guys who were going on an adventure. They just seem like everyday regular people, and I'd love to be able to see more of that. I want to be able to see more coming of age films about being Asian American. As much as I think that our immigrant stories are really important, I do want to see media on that. I think that sometimes can be the automatic go-to for a lot of Asian Americans to talk about the immigrant story. But I also think that the stories that are going on here in the United States are just as fascinating. Like there's that one movie by Justin Chon. It's called Gook, and it was a phenomenal movie, and it was about I think it was like in the 90s or 80s. It was about the LA uprising and the rift between Korean Americans and the Black community in Southern California. And I thought that was a brilliant way to, one, tell the true history of Asian Americans, and also two, to tell a story that is oftentimes overlooked. So I'd love to be able to just have more writers go into the history books of Asian Americans and just plot out all these different little stories, from Asian Americans starting off in canning companies in Alaska, and coming to this country to be fishermen, to, like I was telling before, about Filipinos joining Hollywood and becoming movie extras. And I think that those stories would be fascinating to hear, but I think it'll take some time. I think within about 5 years' time we might get there.
Yeah, I can understand your sentiment, because when I was watching See You Yesterday on Netflix that Spike Lee produced, I was just like, I was excited because it was a movie about Black kids doing time travel. But then it was like, oh, her brother got shot, and that's why she's doing time travel. And I'm like, oh my gosh, can we stop getting killed by the police? Can we just have a feel-good movie?
Like it always has to, like, resort to something.
Travel. Yeah.
I had no idea that he actually made a time travel movie, but was it any good?
Well, he produced it. He didn't direct it, but it was pretty good. It was just like,
why
can we not escape the police brutality?
Yeah, and it's hard because like sometimes there are these certain topics that tend to be recurring, and sometimes like certain aspects of our community want to be like, oh hey, like you need to talk about this, but other aspects of the community are like, no, we don't have to always talk about that. And I think that's one of the tricky things about communities of color looking for representation. So much of our representation we tie to our struggle, and on one hand it's great that it defines us, but on the other hand it doesn't have to always be the only definition for our stories.
Yeah, sometimes when I see people talking about being Black in America, it's like some people think, oh, if you're not from the hood, then you're not Black enough, and it's like, nope, we exist in all type of areas, and so, but we're in 2020 and on, where all the minorities are coming to a place where we're not a monolith, even amongst ourselves, and so.
Yeah, and that's sort of what's fascinating about just watching discussions of representation go down, because you start to see different factions within your own community that say, hey, we need to tell this story. No, we need to tell this story. Or why are we always talking about this group? Or how come we're not talking about that group? And it's wild, because things luckily representation is getting better for a lot of different communities of color. But at the same time, now that there is this opportunity where we can be represented, I feel like a lot of people are sort of getting in more heated discussions. And like I was saying before, it's like we want representation, but now that we have it, we're like super analytical about the types of representation that we have.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to be the catalyst or plan for getting more representation on screen? Do you think it's going to be asking the white people to do it, or creating our own stuff, or a combination of both?
I think both of them are. I think what we're gonna see is sort of a parallel. We're going to see on one side of the runway, you'll have these sort of white produced Hollywood films where they're like, oh my gosh, Crazy Rich Asians have made so much money. We need to go ahead and jump on that hype. I think they're already planning it's going to be a trilogy. I don't know why.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be like Hangover. Yeah. The same movie over and over again, just in different places.
I guess it's canon, because I think that there are a couple other books from the author of Crazy Rich Asians, but I think that we're going to see that. We're going to see the total commercialization of Asian American stories, but then I think we're also going to see sort of a counter movement from Asian American filmmakers and writers and directors who want to say, that's great that we're having all this representation in all these, really high budget films, but I want to be able to tell some of the more underserved communities their stories. It's sort of like that movie Gook. It was an independent produced film and it didn't really get too much acclaim, but I got to be honest, like if you want to stack up a movie next to another movie, Gook I thought was a better experience than Crazy Rich Asians. So I think that the catalyst is going to be more Asian Americans taking the dive and going into filmmaking and taking the risk, because unfortunately a lot of Asian families don't approve of a career like that. And so we're going to have to see a lot more Asian American artists step up to the plate in order for us to get a better piece of that representation. If not, then it's just going to be all led by white Hollywood executives.
I'm not sure if you're familiar, but did David So create a film called Gook too? Or?
Yeah. So it was David So and Justin Chan.
Okay. All right. Okay, cool. I was like, that sounds familiar. So last year you posted about your excitement around the Filipino anime Kumongong, the animation from Sinag Animation Studios. What gives you the most excitement around this anime and the possibilities?
Ooh. To be honest, I don't even remember that one. I'm telling you, it's wild, because so the other day I was talking to someone and they said that they had quoted a post of mine in their book, and they read the post, and I was listening to it, I was like, oh, when did I post that? So I totally forgot. But I remember about posting about that Filipino anime. But I was always fascinated by different countries, different Asian countries trying to put a twist on different Asian forms of pop culture. So for example, like anime is notorious for being linked with Japanese culture, but you're starting to see an emergence of like Chinese anime or Korean anime and Filipino anime, or it's kind of like K-pop, where you have K-pop and then you have all these other Asian countries that are doing J-pop and Filipino pop, but unfortunately, I don't remember that anime.
So in general, what would be exciting about Filipino anime and the possibilities?
For me, I think the most exciting thing about the possibility of Filipino anime is Filipino art styles. Everything from our tattoos to our music to our food is so highly underlooked. The Philippines has well over 3,000 islands, and people forget how much diversity there is in the Philippines. There's different regions, northern and southern, and so I would love just to see more Filipino media, whether it's an anime or whether it's in TV shows, to be able to display all that variance. Even now we're just starting to peel back the layers of the different types of cultures within Chinese culture. And so, I would love to be able to geek out and learn about more Filipino artists, because I think that we do have a very distinct style, and especially our tattoos. So when the Spaniards came to the Philippines, I forgot what the term is, but it's like Los Pintados something, but basically they call the Philippines the land of like the tattooed people or something like that. Because indigenous Filipinos, they were covered in tattoos to signify like their tribe and their history and whatnot. So I would love to be able to see something like that. So I'd love to be able to see pre-colonial Filipino culture in anime. Like that would be awesome, because Filipino culture before Spain, like there were sultans, there were different leaders within different regions, and I think there are books written on Filipino mythology. I just haven't really looked into it, but that would be pretty cool too.
Yeah. So after finding out that their culture would play a more significant role in the Frozen sequel, the Sami Parliament of Norway, Sweden, and Finland, along with the Sami Council, reached out to the movie producers to collaborate. So the filmmakers were on board, and the Sami groups rounded up a group of experts to act as cultural consultants for the animation team. And this is a quote. It's a treaty, says Went. It's in keeping how indigenous nations have tended to negotiate with other entities in the past. I think it's a great precedent for how indigenous nations might deal with a corporation the size of Walt Disney, as well as governments and other agencies around the use of their cultural and intellectual property in entertainment. So we typically think of treaties with history, war, and different countries and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on treaties for film and animation, where there's a group of people from that culture that is entering into a treaty with Walt Disney or DreamWorks or Blue Sky or something like that, and are responsible for making sure that their culture is accurately represented?
I think it's actually really interesting. On one hand, I'm always going to be very pessimistic of a lot of, bigwig executives, and at the end of the day, I know that their priority is to squeeze out as much money as possible or pay out as little money as possible. But I think that as long as the agreements are fair and it's fair for the communities, for the community, I think it should be fine. I think as long as there really is it's a robust form of communication. It's not just like, hey, dude, who's part of this culture, you look like you can speak for us. We just get the token Asian person to speak for all Asian people and sign away our whole entire culture.
Right.
But yeah, if they go through the actual process of talking to different cultural leaders and different people to gain a more rounded out input, I think that'd be awesome. But again, I think that I think that the confusing thing is how do you monetize and how do you put a value on you're going to make a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar movie profiting off our culture? I'm just curious to know how that payout works. How do they value? Okay, if this movie is $100 million, 30% of the value comes from your culture You know, so I'm
Yeah.
just curious to know about like the sort of the breakdown of that. But other than that, I think that's awesome that movie companies are reaching out to get that input.
Yeah, I know that they did that with Coco, where they like talked to a specific grandmother and modeled the grandmother after her and stuff like that. And there was some discrepancy. I think they tried to pay her, but she did take the money or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, but yeah, I feel like there's I feel like the lawyers will be excited about trying to figure that out, because I went to there was a conference in New Orleans that's I think it's now in Canada called Collision Conference, and something one of the panelists there was a panel about how with virtual reality they're the lawyers are having to create new contracts and all this stuff because it's like unknown land, even though it's been around for a long time. They're like trying to figure out the legality of different things in virtual reality. So I'm sure with treaties and indigenous or just different communities, it will be interesting for a lawyer to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. Just trying to like navigate that scene and trying to, you know, draw out how like the rules of like, okay, you know, this is going to cost this much, or this is how much we're going to pay you. So I'm curious to see how it rolls out.
And then like capitalism will be like, well, we'll just go back to doing our own thing.
Yeah, because then it's like they could just be like, oh, you know, we're not actually going to ditch the community. We're just going to take your culture anyways, and we're just going to profit off of it. Because fortunately, that's what they have done before. So it's like, this is better than that, but
right. So you probably don't remember this either. A couple years ago, Jordan Peele turned down directing a remake of the anime Akira.
I remember that.
Can you share what your excitement around the idea of this was, specifically with like just Jordan Peele doing that?
So I was really excited. This was after I had watched Get Out, so I was like, "Oh my god, this is gonna be so cool." And I think I was mainly excited because, having watched Get Out, I loved the psychological play that went on in that movie, and I think that Akira is such a like it, you know, for, you know, excuse my language, but it was a mind fuck. Akira, like you. I remember that was the first anime movie that I'd watched, and I watched it like not that long ago. I just, admittedly, I didn't grow up watching a lot of anime, and I remember thinking, okay, cool. It's like this guy in this bike, and you know he has this weird friend, and then obviously the movie just goes like in a totally different direction, and you just start to see all like the trippy visuals, and so I liked the idea of him directing it for that aspect of trying to tap into the weirdness of it and the sort of psychological nature of Akira. But yeah, unfortunately, I know that he turned it down.
Yeah, he particularly after coming out with Get Out, he was just saying that he wanted to concentrate on making new things as opposed to making the same movie. But
yeah, and I know that he jumped on board with Twilight Zone. And I saw like one episode, and it was really, really good. And so, like, I can only imagine if it would have happened, but
yeah, tear.
Yeah.
So, kind of going from, I know Jordan Peele is like a special case, but do you think there is a special relationship between Black people and Asian people that can cause like the opposite side of the spectrum response to like a Black person possibly doing an Asian thing more than the majority doing an Asian thing?
Sorry,
or is
what do you mean?
So like, do you think there is a special relationship between Black people and Asian people, or maybe Black people, Asian culture? I feel like most likely Black men in Japanese culture, but is there a relationship there where you don't get that where the majority is trying to do something, and if you see a Black person trying to do it, you might give it more grace or be more excited about it?
Oh, like, do I think that there's like a relationship between Asians and Black communities, like in terms of our stories, you mean? Or
yeah, like where you're not I understand that with Jordan Peele that there was the excitement about his mind being in it, but sometimes sometimes even if it's a white guy with an amazing mind, you might not be as excited.
Oh yeah. I totally know what you mean. Yeah, so like I think, and I think this is what this is what a lot of people, especially a lot of people of color, have a sort of a hang up on when it comes to white people producing our films. It's not that, you know, we think that all white directors are bad directors, or you know, they have shit ideas, but I think there is something to be said about living your entire existence and carrying the weight of various stereotypes and living through the experience of constantly having to bat away those stereotypes and constantly trying to prove and disprove stereotypes, and just like, you know, this perpetual hamster wheel of what it means to be a person of color in the United States, where you're always feeling you have to defend yourself, or you feel like you always have to speak up and say something. And not to say that that's a bad thing, but, you know, I just know that a lot of white people don't have to go through that. You know, they don't have to essentially defend their existence, and they don't have to defend why they are here. And, you know, not to say that I think that Jordan Peele is going to be able to like tap into the mind of the Asian, and, you know, like, but I think that having that background definitely helps. Having the perspective to know what it's like to be othered is really important. And I think that, you know, going back into what you were saying, for your question about like what aspects of Filipino culture would I like to see represented in media, you know, for me, I think that a lot of what I feel is important in terms of representation isn't so much about the physical and like what you can see, but also what the characters are experiencing, you know? Because like, I don't really vibe with rich Asians, you know? Like, I want to be able to vibe with someone who is artistic, and someone who's confused, and someone who's dealing with mental health issues. And so I think, you know, having a director like Jordan Peele, or having a director of color who at least understands what it's like to be othered in this country, will be a whole lot better than, I don't know, Zack Snyder directing an Asian movie.
I feel like that's a good segue into the section where we're giving voice to our communities. So in November, you mentioned how it's taken you years to realize that the way you play RPGs, role-playing games, is heavily influenced by your immigrant mentality. Can you expand on this? And did it open a world of thought to how you think about gameplay and culture?
Yeah, you know, it was a really emotional moment. I remember I was sitting and playing Pokemon Let's Go Eevee with my wife, because she had bought it for me for my birthday, and I was playing it. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, it's basically the original Pokemon Blue and Yellow games, but it's like fit for the Nintendo Switch. But anyways, I was playing through, right? And, you know, it's like Pokemon, you can build up your roster of Pokemon, you have to heal them and level them up and whatnot. And I remember playing, and my wife came up and she was like, hey, like, why are your Pokemon all like super weak? Like, you should go heal them. You should, you know, go give them like the different potions and whatnot. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. And I noticed that I was hoarding all of my potions, all of my items, and all of my Pokemon were like at the brink of dying. and every time I would want to heal them, I would take them to the Pokemon Center to heal them for free, because I didn't want to waste any potions. And then it just like it hit me just randomly. I was like, wow, you know, I was letting my own Pokemon, and I was sort of seeing this like in two different ways. One, I was looking at it from the perspective of me playing this game, but two, I was looking at it from the perspective of like, I don't just do this with Pokemon, I do this with myself. Like, I do this with myself, where, you know, I will go hours without eating, or I will like not take care of myself in different ways because I'm so concerned about like money, or I'm so concerned about something else. And I think that really harkens back to what a lot of immigrants go through, and a lot of people who are lower income starting off go through, where, you know, you just feel a perpetual sense of anxiety. You feel like everything can vanish. in a moment's notice. And I think that for a lot of immigrants and immigrant families, like, they definitely feel that, and they have this sense that, you know, we're here in this country, we need to do everything that we can to make it. If not, then we're going to go back to that, whatever that is, whether it is that country, whether it is that neighborhood. We are always just fearful of that. And so I think that fear sometimes carries on with you for the rest of your life, and it infiltrates so many different parts of you, whether it is your ability or inability to take care of your mental health, or whether it is the way that you play video games. And I think it's just so fascinating that, you know, how you were raised and your upbringing can influence your psychology in something as random as playing a video game. So I thought it was really interesting. And I'm 29, and I'm still learning how my mind works. I'm still learning how my upbringing has shaped the way that I think and I make various decisions. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm in my 30s and I'm making breakthroughs like every week. Like, oh my god, that's why I do that. like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And sometimes I'll talk to, like, you know, if there are people who are younger and people who are in like their early 20s, and like they don't get it, they don't like understand because you haven't reached that moment yet. And I was like, it happens in the mid 20s on.
Right.
And I talk to people who are in their 30s and 40s, and they're like, oh yeah, in your 30s and 40s, it just gets even more intense. You just start more repressed memories start to come back to the surface, but it's exciting though, because, you know, like to actually learn something new about yourself, you know, it can change how you do things, and you sort of become more intimate with how you work and your process, and you know, you're just being more honest with yourself, and you're just like, you know what? I've been alive 29 years. I understand that this is how I am. I need to start doing this. So, hooray for breakthroughs.
I'm mostly excited about it because I'm trying not to mess up my future children on accident or on purpose, but like on accident, it's just like, oh yeah, that will probably be bad. So let me fix that now.
Yeah. And that's another thing that sort of motivates you to crack that habit, because like I think one of the worst things is like when you see something in yourself and you're like, shit, that's the thing that my mom did, and I do it too. Oh my gosh, because there are certain things that like my mom would get anxious about, and my mom would get like stressed out about, and I do that too, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and I'm the same way, because Olivia and I want to have kids one day, and I don't want to develop those habits. So it's so important for me to like be cognizant of it now, so I can try to like, you know, when I'm ready to have kids, I can, you know, leave that shit.
Right. So as Black woman animator, I try to put myself out there to not only be a representative of for my community, whether that's like the Black community or animation community, and for others to see that there's someone who does animation and looks like them, but also to be a resource for people to get information. So what do you feel your role on the Love Life of an Asian Guy platform is?
You know, that's a really good question, because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. My page has changed over the years so much. I started off writing about my own personal life. I started writing about interracial dating. Then I wrote about, you know, racism and white supremacy. And, you know, now I talk more about politics and economics. And so my page, I've always seen it as a fluid entity. It isn't a page where this is what we talk about and this is what we always talk about.
Yeah.
And I try to just, I try to make it a little bit more free flowing like that. Because I think one of the tricky things about having a platform like this is you're constantly in a battle of the content that you want to make that feels good to you, that fuels your creative energy, and then the content that other people want. Right. And sometimes it's really difficult because, you know, by the time you get a sense of what content your audience likes, you might be a different person. You know, like people change and creators change, and, you know, my interests today might be totally different than they are next year. It's not necessarily a testament to me changing my morals and my ethics or anything like that, but sometimes it's just I want to talk about different things. And so when I try to contemplate my role and the, what my page is supposed to do. Like, what is it even for?
Mm-hmm.
I think what I want it to be is I want it to be a space for people of color to be able to share their opinions unfiltered and to be able to have a space to just converse. And I know that even for me, going on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, there aren't a lot of spaces where you can really just dig into some of the issues that are really on your mind.
Yeah.
If you try to talk about race on a CNN article, then you're going to get trolled by a bunch of racist people. So it's like the internet is this weird thing where everyone can join, and so you really have to cultivate your own environment. And so I want the Love Life of an Asian Guy to be a platform for to uplift more people of color. That's why I've been trying to invest more time and resources into llag radio, because I think looking back at my life and the work that I've done on the page, I got lucky. I came at a great time. I put in the work that I did, and just over time the platform grew, and I'm just one person, and I know that there are so many other people who have that potential too, and I want to be able to try to get more names out there, because I know how hard it is to be seen. I know how hard it is to grow a channel and how hard it is to grow a podcast. And so I'm struggling building out my podcast too, and I want to be able to just offer that opportunity, so that way more communities of color can sort of benefit from this thing that we're all going through.
Yeah, I feel like something that your luck comes from is also being consistent, because last year I decided at the beginning of the year to come out with a YouTube video every Wednesday, and I succeeded. 52 YouTube videos, and some of them came out at like 11:59, but it was still on Wednesday. And so when people see that consistency, then they're more willing to kind of be there with you. And then something else I noticed from my consistency is that now people will send me things. And I mean, because my industry is so specific, the animation industry, and I'm in the industry, most of the time when people are sending me things, I already know, or I already knew like 2 years ago. But I mean, I appreciate that people are seeing what I represent and sending me stuff to post or to comment on or something, or like, oh, you're in animation, did you see this? And I appreciate that.
Yeah, and that is probably the most important thing that I could say that any creator should do, which is be consistent. Because when you're following a page, sometimes it's like, when do they post? How often do they post? But if they know that you're always there every week or every day, and especially if you have certain times or a certain schedule, it's kind of like a TV show. Hey, it's Friday, it's time for this show, and so I think people are naturally programmed to consume media that way, where they have certain habits and they like to watch their shows on certain times and certain days. And so, me being consistent was probably the biggest factor. I don't know. I just decided one day I'm just not going to ever stop posting. I'm going to make sure that every single day I try to post. Nowadays I've been sort of being less strict with myself, and I take the weekends off.
Yeah.
But like you said, posting consistently is the most important thing, because then people realize that they know where to find you, and in your case, people start sending you content, and then it just becomes easier to know what to post about, because people are telling you what they want to see.
Yeah.
And so for anybody out there who is trying to build out their platform, consistency is the most important thing. It might not be elegant, you might not have the best production quality, or you might have typos, or it might look ugly or whatever, but I think as long as you put in the time, people will respect that most.
Yeah, that's what I think too, because I'm always filming my YouTube videos on my phone, but if the content is what people want to hear, then you don't have to have the DSLR.
And that's what it took me a while to understand, because I was really into cameras and lighting, and I remember I would just stress out about I would tell people like, oh, I'm gonna make this video, and I would be like, I remember a couple times I said that I was going to shoot a video, and I had the lights on, I had my outfit on, and I even put on makeup so I wasn't all glistening. And I remember just being frozen, scared, like I don't know what to say. Like, and I would just get so nervous because I had this whole setup and it was so complicated. But I think when you find out your process, and if you find something that just works, it doesn't matter if you record it on your phone. It doesn't matter if like there's audio in the background, is, you know, someone's talking or whatever. Like, if you have something that people genuinely want to tune into, they really don't care about the quality at the end of the day. As long as it's not like totally consumable, then they're gonna love it.
So before I ask you a wrap-up question, do you have any good stories of people coming up to you or reaching out to you that center around representation or your part in filling a void?
I think the comment that I get that sometimes trips me out is when people say that either they use my posts as inspiration, or they've used my posts to educate their students in their classroom. I've had a couple teachers and professors say that they use some of my content to teach about race or politics or anything like that. And I think it's mind-blowing to me for a number of reasons. One, I was always a bad student, and so it's just like to be the slacker, you know, hence why I identified so much with Harold and Kumar, to be the school slacker, and then on the other hand be the person who is like helping professors teach, is mind-blowing. But I think also when people say that, you know, they are inspired by my work or the things that I say, I look back at when I first started blogging in the first place. You know, I was 18 years old. I was in college. You know, when I was looking at the internet, the only person who was really out there was Angry Asian Man. And I didn't really, you know, vibe with his page too well. And I wanted to do something on my own. And I was like, you know what? There just wasn't the type of content that I felt represented my story, you know? And so that's why I started blogging about my dating experiences and what it meant to be Asian. And so, you know, what started off as me not seeing the representation out there in the world has sort of led to where I am now, where people feel like I am representing their community. And so that is what's such a trip, you know, like to think that I started off with not having anything, and then now we're in this time where there is representation everywhere. And for me to be a part of that equation, I'm really grateful. But, you know, I try not to let any of the negative or the positive comments get too deep into my head. You know, sometimes it can really mess with you. So I'm grateful, but
So to wrap it up, do you have any comments, or whether it's on representation or any words of inspiration or anything to give to people as we say goodbye?
Yeah, so I'd say that you know, when it comes to representation, the tricky thing about representation is it isn't a status that you reach and then it stays that way. It's not that oh, we're okay, cool, we're level 16 representation, cool. Like that is there's only way we can only go up from here.
Right.
Representation is it's a scale. It's a pendulum that's constantly moving, and it's something that you have to put pressure on and invest in and put your dollars in to support these things. Because that's another thing. It's like there's representation, but then, you know, there's also the act of our communities going out and actually supporting these films.
Yeah.
And supporting these projects. So I'd say that, you know, my note of motivation or inspiration for anybody when it comes to representation is to constantly be seeking for it, constantly be, you know, on the lookout for opportunities to share your own voice and to uplift other voices. You know, you don't necessarily have to be a filmmaker, but you can be someone who blogs about different issues and topics within your community. You know, representation doesn't have to be a movie. It doesn't have to be a TV show. It could be a podcast. It could be a TV. It could be a YouTube series. You know,
right?
And so, I'd say the most important form of representation is the representation of your own voice.
Yeah.
Because there will always be people who will want to represent your whole community, but there will never be anybody who will want to represent you. And
Right.
you are a representation of your own community. So if you tell your story, you will inevitably be telling the story of your community, because there are so many people who are probably just like you. And, you know, who knows, you might be able to be in that position where the stuff that you are creating then becomes a representation for somebody else.
So where can people find you if they like you after this YouTube video?
Yeah. So if you are interested in following my work, I'm available on pretty much all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. I just started TikTok. I'm gonna figure that thing out.
Right. Just watch. That's what I've heard. Watch first, and then you'll hopefully figure it out.
I'm still I'm like scratching my head. I'll figure it out. But you can find me at the llag. Again, it's on all platforms. Yeah. And I'm also,
and that's LLAG.
Yes. So the LLAG on all different platforms.
Okay, if you liked what we said, please let us know. And like, so I know it's real. Comment and tell me how you feel. Subscribe to Seal the Deal and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I'll see you in the next video.
See ya.